Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 2021 joint branch meeting between the Fort Worth and Dallas ACE branches. Hopefully, this will be our last year to have to virtually stream this joint meeting. So that being said, with this being premiered on YouTube, I do hope that you've enjoyed all the technical sessions so far that you've been able to view. If for whatever reason you weren't able to view a certain technical session that you wanted to, you were out, or there were two scheduled for the same hour slot, these will stay up on our YouTube page. So feel free to go back and view those on your own time. Before we have our guest speaker, Russell Laughlin, come to speak, I wanted to just make a few announcements for the Fort Worth branch, and then the Dallas branch will make some of their announcements as well. So the next Fort Worth branch meeting will be September 20th, 2021. This will be an in-person meeting. I mean, fingers crossed, everything stays. This will be an in-person meeting. We don't have an August meeting. We typically take the month of August off. That's when the Fort Worth branch, the board members and the staff, they get together and do a strategic planning meeting that month. And it's just a good summer month to take off, give us all a little break. So that next meeting will be September 20th in person. We will send out details of where that will be. Likely will be the Riata again, but we will let you know as that date approaches. An important announcement we have to make. So every year, the Fort Worth branch nominates and selects a Young Engineer of the Year, and we normally announce that in February during Engineers Week. This year, we held off the announcement. We did not announce it in February. We wanted to hold off until we could officially announce it in this joint meeting that we have. Hopefully, more people will be viewing it here. As TSPE didn't host their meeting, which is normally we partner up with them in February. So we decided to postpone it and wait till this joint meeting. And it does give me great honor to announce the 2021 Young Engineer of the Year. This year is Lindsay Lafferty. Lindsay has been with the Fort Worth branch for a very long time. She's been helping us out. She's been an extremely beneficial partner to the Fort Worth branch. Lindsay is our branch director. She does a lot of correlation for us at the state level. Lindsay is also our newsletter chair. So those newsletters that go out about once a quarter, that she's putting those together. She's lassoing information from all of us. And I can tell you right now, I owe her information for the upcoming newsletter. So we will have to get that out to her pretty quickly. But she's an excellent engineer, an excellent leader in the work that she does. I have no doubt that she will be a branch president one day. And as you look in the past recipients of the Young Engineer of the Year award, almost all of them have become branch presidents. Almost all of them have gone to hold high positions in companies. So I have no doubt Lindsay will definitely move on to do that. And when you get a chance, do send her another congratulations, whether it be an email, give her a call, jump on her LinkedIn, let her know how much you're proud of her for being able to achieve that award. So we'll be sure to get her plaque and the official award certificates and everything over to her. And now that's the official announcement's been made. So please help me congratulate her with this award. So without further ado, let's let the Dallas branch give their announcements, and then we'll have the guest speaker. Thank you.
Howdy, everyone. This is Jonathan Brower, the ASC Dallas branch president. On behalf of the ASC Dallas Board of Directors and the entire ASC Dallas membership, I want to thank the Fort Worth branch for stepping up and planning this year's joint meeting. They have put together a great lineup of technical speakers and a fantastic keynote speaker. We look forward to seeing all of our ASC friends from across the Metroplex in person at next year's joint meeting. The Dallas branch wants to extend an invite to civil engineers from both Dallas and Fort Worth to the 2021 ASC Dallas Golf Tournament benefiting the GB Man Scholarship Fund. The tournament will be held on Monday, October 4th at the Texas Rangers Golf Club in Arlington. To register a team or to become a tournament sponsor, please visit our website, www.dallasasce.org, for more information. The Dallas branch has also recently opened up nominations for board positions and committee chairs. If you are interested in joining the Dallas branch leadership, please visit our website or feel free to email me directly at president@dallasasce.org. We are always looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas to make our branch better and better each year. Finally, the Dallas branch is happy to announce that we will be making a return to in-person meetings, starting with our August branch meeting at noon on Monday, August 9th. The meetings will be held at the VOOV Meeting and Event Center, the same venue we used prior to the pandemic. I look forward to seeing you all soon back in person, and I hope you are having a great summer. Bye, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here this fine day. Today, we are pleased to welcome Russell Laughlin, who serves as the Executive Vice President of Hillwood. Russell Laughlin oversees the management, operation, land and infrastructure planning, and entitlements of Alliance, Texas, which is a 26,000-acre mixed-use master planned community. His expertise includes long-term planning initiatives, economic development, and public-private partnerships. He has been instrumental in the development of Alliance, Texas, and the DFW area in leading long-term regional planning initiatives. With that, I ask that you give your full attention to Mr. Laughlin as he presents his future world vision.
Thank you, Derek. Good afternoon. And first, let me say to all of your participants here, thank you for your service in the civil engineering world. Current items that you guys have begun to discuss and consider across the society relating to the future world vision, your initiative and infrastructure being reimagined, and things that are happening around technology, artificial intelligence, mobility innovation, supply chain resiliency, the built environment, all things which our average citizen today sees them and understands. They're beginning to influence the way we design, plan, implement our future cities. Some of your videos that I've watched address questions like, where are our megacities be? Will civil engineers remain civil engineers, or will they migrate into the world of system engineering? Will there be microgrids that we have to begin to incorporate, need to incorporate? What do our customers tell us? What do they want? Direct, indirect influences, how artificial intelligence will begin to inform us on our built environments, and where that happens and where it starts. So with that, glad to present to you the Alliance Texas Mobility Innovation Zone here today. And what I'd like to do for you is maybe a little bit of history, because it's informative in terms of how paradigm shifts happen in our built environment. So real estate and those influences which begin to make us change and encourage us to make changes as we go forward. And Alliance, Texas is a perfect example of that. So I'm gonna give you a little history tied into 30 years ago when the infrastructure reimagined question was posed by the Hillwood organization, which is led by Ross Perot, and a development happened called Alliance, Texas. And then the pivot today and some of the questions that you're posing among your society members are questions that we as developers are proposing to ourselves. Our customers are asking us, and certainly our regulatory agencies are asking the same question. So we're gonna flip through. I'm going to try to build a case that's relative to things you're considering, to make it real, and to understand things we're doing as we begin to embrace this in a commercialized environment as opposed to an R&D or perhaps a science project by a different definition. So that's my introduction. Hopefully this is very helpful and beneficial for you. And again, thank you for all that you do and the questions and challenges you're proposing to yourselves. So first, a little history. If you don't know, Alliance, Texas is a 26,000 acre project located in North Texas on the Denton County and Tarrant County lines. Our company, Hillwood, is founded by Ross Perot Sr. and Ross Perot Jr. Any change that's led in our world today generally has a visionary or a proponent behind it that understands the timing, the pivot needed, and the opportunities. How you do that, why you do it, or some of the questions you've posed. One of your questions was, should our customers, our citizens, be telling us as opposed to we designing a system we think they need? We would answer that based on our history, going back to 1965 when Mr. Ross Perot Sr. Stood up a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems. And that was the first for the younger generation here, data processing company in the US. So Mr. Perot and his efforts with EDS launched today what you call the technology data world with EDS. Then Ross Perot Jr. carried that baton on to the next generation when we developed Alliance, Texas. We're headquartered in Texas. We work in about 6 countries in 29 to 35 states. And I'll weave that into the technology pivot in 1987 and try to relate it to 2021 for you. So why is it important to look at your metrics? So the only reason you would change the way you do business, the way you would change the transportation systems, the energy systems, is because there are economic reasons that benefit society and individuals and businesses. So when you look at Alliance, Texas, here's a few metrics for you. Again, 26,000 acres, 30 years of development. We're about 40% developed today. We've developed over 216 million square feet. We still have 100+ million to go. And you can see the metrics across the mixed use, the residential, on the multifamily. So the point of this is any particular real estate use that's out there today can't be looked at just by itself. It's part of the overall bundle of uses, and they all interact daily. So out of this set of metrics that I'm showing you here, the economic benefits to our municipalities is really where, at the end of the day, we measure, is this working? So are customers utilizing it? Are they embracing the changes that have been put in place by disciplines such as yourself, thought leaders such as us? And then is it benefiting the public? And is it benefiting the businesses? And most importantly, are our public entities benefiting, i.e. tax, economic growth, sales tax, et cetera. As we look at why Texas is in the forefront of this technology, artificial intelligence, new built environment revolution, it's clear there are a lot of reasons for that. I don't have to enumerate those. You're all very schooled in the things that our state does, but just suffice it to say, we are open for business. We have leadership that embraces growth, smart business policies, enabling legislation that allows you to try new technologies, for instance, driverless and autonomous trucks, which I will speak to, low taxation. Witness today, 30 to 40 companies a year are moving out of California to Texas, and we don't see that trend stopping. The point I'm trying to make for you here is that Texas will continue, first let me say, has the opportunity to lead the country in the adoption of these new built environments that you're considering because of what I've just described to you. North Texas specifically, for those of you who are located in the North Dallas region, which your chapter here is very familiar with, DFW sort of leads the area in Texas in economic growth and development. Our population adding 400 million people a day means economic growth will happen. how we manage it, how we build the environment, manage those growth demands is really the question we're posing. And what's the right way to do that and grow economically? So as we think forward to our 2040, 2050 year timeframe, of which you have a state population of 50 million people, you have a metropolitan area here. So, quote, one of your mega cities. Perhaps 10 million is the minimum number for that. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20, but let's call 10 million being a mega city. That would be the DFW Metroplex. We'll be somewhere between 8 and 10 million people in the next couple of decades, easily. As we look at the economic impact that I've talked about, and very briefly for those of you not familiar, so this is Alliance, Texas, and I'm circling the areas that we're talking about. The dark blue, Alliance Airport, in our industrial core. That guitar pick area that I just circled is about, let's call it 100 square miles. We started in 1987. I said we're 6 miles west of DFW Airport, 10 miles north of downtown Fort Worth, and it's anchored by mostly and led by industrial, light manufacturing, warehousing in the early days, and now to all those other types of uses: office, industrial, mixed use, retail, multifamily, et cetera. Originally $150 million investment by the FAA. And I'm pointing this out because it's important to ask when we're designing and we are beginning to opine on what our next generation of infrastructure, our built environment should be. Without question, there will be public investment required, and indeed that will happen. And therefore there has to be metrics. So off $150 million investment in the early days in Alliance Airport, a little bit of State Highway 170 and some water and sewer improvements by the city of Fort Worth today, we're at about $12 billion of private investment, some 54 million square feet that's been developed today, and over 540 corporate residents. And this is really key. Those are the customers. These are the users of our built environment that are telling us what they need. They're all ranked in any Fortune ranking. So really good feedback to us as to what we need to be doing. And of course, the population we talked about. So just orient you there in terms of the area we're talking about. All use categories are involved here. As we talk about what it is that we do, our roots are industrial. I've mentioned sort of the legacy of the Perot family and things we've done, how we've innovated along the way. We're rooted in industrial. And at this point, I'd like to give you, now tie it to 1987, and I'm circling Alliance Airport here. And so when you think about innovation and put it in the context of the questions you're posing to yourselves now, is what is the next built environment going to encompass, entail? So in 1987, built and based on the need by a national airspace study, which said we needed additional reliever airports around our major metropolitan airports, DFW Airport at that time. And where do we have holes where we couldn't get planes down out of the sky in case of a national emergency or otherwise weather? Well, where Alliance Airport sits today, there was no airport. And so the approach by the FAA and planners at that time was build a limited general aviation airport, which would serve as a single purpose facility to get large aircraft down out of the sky, a reliever for DFW. We posed the question in the forward thought from then, what if this were a different airport? What if we created the world's first industrial airport that was dedicated entirely 100% to industrial commercial aviation, not passenger aviation? And so we challenged the FAA, Mr. Perot did, Ross Jr., and we created the first industrial airport in the world, dedicated. The FAA created a category for this. And so that was the second innovation milestone in the Perot family in terms of forward thinking. And that created what we know today now as Alliance Airport, 11,000 foot parallel runways. So we fly from this location nonstop to anywhere in the world, which is part of our overall supply chain proposition. So we have many advantages here around the logistics. This is the core area that I've been talking about. Again, 7 miles west of DFW Airport, 10 miles north of downtown Fort Worth. Started in 1987, 50 million square feet again. The things that we did in that time, in addition to the airport, will pose the same question you're posing yourselves today. What do we have to have in 2025 to be the absolute best built environment? So in the day, it was basic infrastructure at a different level. So next generation of roadways, interstate, state highways, next generation of rail facilities. I'm going to circle real quick for you here, the Burlington Northern Intermodal Facility. And I'll speak about this in a second. That did not exist. We created that here in North Texas. And then our basic infrastructure of energy. So that's transmission, generation, transmission, and distribution. And then our water and sewer, obviously. And then perhaps most importantly, in the context of today's world, our fiber, distributed fiber network. So both long haul and network, so local capacity. And each of you today are hearing a lot about this in our political world. So social equity, how do we create broadband for all? So we're going to speak a little bit about that because it will inform the things that you as professionals will be dealing with. So we had all of that hard infrastructure that I just talked about planned at the most robust level, most flexible level we possibly could, thinking 20 years out. And we leveraged that in terms of this built environment, which has turned into the $11 billion of private investment that I just talked about, all in the early days, global logistics based. So again, back up for a second and think DFW, an inland mega city that has no maritime port. So we've connected DFW to LA Long Beach via the BNSF intermodal facility. To give you an example, 14 trains a day, you leave the maritime port nonstop to DFW, to Alliance, and this intermodal facility, and unload intermodal, so internationally shipped goods into the DFW market. So again, now the consumers, they're driving that demand for containerized goods, everything you do every day. And in fact, fun factoid for each of you out there, when you think about this, when you see a 18-wheel tractor trailer dragging one of these 40-foot containers down the road, here's what you need to remember. You're part of this demand equation. Each of us are responsible in our consumption habits, 1 container a year of imported goods on average, 1 container a year. So figure 10 million people, you got 10 million containers driving around and getting into this community. As we look at how do we make decision and what's happened, I'd like to share this with you because I believe in some of your videos, you've asked the question, how do our customers, how do our citizens play in this? Well, in our world, that's our business enterprise here that are solving their customers. And we've organized this for you in industry silos. And the reason this is important to understand is, and this is just a calling card that we like to show, those 540 business enterprises we do business with out here and across the world, you can see the names involved here, really thought leaders in each of their business worlds, whether it's automotive, consumer goods, e-commerce, technology. And every one of these companies today is leaning very heavily into the world of technology, the world of artificial intelligence, the world of automation, and they're trying to solve efficiency, resiliency, and reliability. So think about those for a second as you talk about the world of supply chain, and we'll have a few examples as we go forward. So I won't point out a lot here, but just know whatever silo businesses are operating in, they have somebody in their corporate structure who is evaluating what do we need to do to respond to our customers and the embracing technology as it relates to mobility and artificial intelligence, data, et cetera. Leaders, obviously, you'll see on their Amazon, Facebook, FedEx, Walmart.com. You go into the logistics side, JB Hunt, Too Simple, which I'll talk about some more, BNSF, on and on and on. Everybody's leaning into this, and they're helping you make decisions by telling you what they need. So we have a saying, Mr. Perot, Ross Jr., he goes, why would we ever build anything without asking our customer what they want, listening to them, and then go try to figure out how to solve that problem and or challenge or opportunity they gave us. And that's exactly how Mr. Perot started EDS in 1965. The world of data processing started with that very question. What do my customers want? What are they telling me? So that's a 30-year look at Alliance Texas and a few questions we posed, how we solved it in what is now a traditional method. Back then was very much innovative and thinking out 30 years in advance. So put your cap on for a second. You're all really bright. You're sitting here in 2021, put 30 years on the calendar, and you're in the year 2050 to 2060. What does the world look like? And it is evolving very rapidly, much more rapidly today than in my early days of my career. And so your opportunities become much more obvious very, very quickly today, but you're also threats in the sense of getting it wrong by not paying attention to what your customers want and using those metrics around how do we return. So we stood up the Alliance Texas Mobility Innovation Zone 2 years ago, and it was in a response to we'd finished 30 years of thinking and executing the next built environment. We asked our customers, what are the next 30 years? So the parallel for you guys, you're asking that question right now of your customers, your contacts, your communities. We've done the same thing. And what we heard from all of those customers, we need to think about how we build efficiency, how we build reliability, how we build resiliency, and how we are better stewards of the public dollars that are going to be invested in public infrastructure in this case. So the Mobility Innovation Zone was our charge at establishing a place here at Alliance, Texas, where we could embrace the technologies, recruit those technologies, and commercialize them. I want to make a real clear point right here. You'll find as you're in this industry, there are many think tanks, research and development institutions out there. Think Texas Transportation Institute. That's research. For us, we do it in a commercialized environment. So we're past the science project, we're past the R&D, or at least we're in the outer stages of it, later stages, and we're commercializing now. That means our customers are paying for the service, and their customers are benefiting from those services. So this Alliance Texas Mobility Innovation Zone layers over across the top of our 25 to 30,000 acres. And we're starting around our basic supply chain model. And that is just movement of goods, light manufacturing, automation, what it means to a built environment like DFW. The advantages we have, I've spoken a bit about those. If we go back into the foundation we set 30 years ago, and you're thinking about the foundation that you have today, now 30 years in the future, we've just built upon it. We have a great one-of-a-kind infrastructure here at Alliance. We have aviation, we have Class 2, Class 1 railroads, intermodal facility, truly is an inland port. We have great highway systems, which we've worked the last 20 years to improve, i.e. the North Tarrant Express. And we have a platform here with all these customers who now, so these are supply chain logistics providers, who are wanting to move past the testing and scaling into commercialization. And that future is now. And we say that in our world today, we're often posed the question, so when does this happen? And what we say is it's happening now. And that's not, hoping it's happening. we are commercializing automated technology, which I will show you. We're approaching it from ground up. The opportunity, I've framed up a bit here. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and things that you know inherently, but I think it's good to just have a few bullet points. So why is mobility innovation? And again, we're just talking about mobility innovation, but I want to draw a connection for you. You can't think of these in silos. I mentioned to you the mix of uses and the interaction of all those. Certainly land use is one, how your land use is implemented is two, but then it's everything around that that has to support it. So when we talk about mobility innovation, let's take the adoption of EVs, electric vehicles. Not only are you thinking about infrastructure locally to provide for, let's say, the recharging, you have to think about the infrastructure on a regional basis, sub-regional or statewide basis that goes to generated power capacities and new peaks and curves and demands that go to, if we implement that. So I won't get into environmental, social, green discussion or issues here, but know that as we pivot to a different type of energy requirement, it impacts how we do things. We're talking about here for a second, what is happening in the supply chain world that is making this a real opportunity now, and how innovation in technology is informing what we do next. So if we look at 2030, you will have at least 30% of the trucks on our roadways today, they'll move to autonomy. Some level of autonomy, level 3, 4, and 5. We would tell you today, you're already at level 3.75, nearing level 4. Level 5, for those of you who may not be familiar with that, is 100% full autonomy 100% of the time. Really hard to get there, but the curve is bending rapidly. So adoption of autonomous trucks is happening very quickly. You also have, based on what I told you, an exponential increase in intermodal container import volume and activity. And that's driven by you, one person, one container a year, your demand for goods, and those goods are going to be largely imported. Many will be manufactured in North America, but international trade will drive. So intermodal activity, how do I get large volumes of containers in and move them through the system efficiently, safely, reliable, and with resiliency? And then there is the capital market segment, which is telling you where people believe they should put their money and how much money is flowing into the technology world right now. You may not follow that. You don't need to follow that. You just need to know it's extraordinary. We watch it, we understand it. The amount of money that is pursuing the right technology, the right OEMs to adopt the technology innovations, and the right commercial applications is unprecedented and extraordinary. And it's funding really great startups in all sectors of mobility innovation and or other technologies, but particularly in logistics. You might be asking yourself at this point right now, why logistics, Russell? What are you doing? And I would tell you that we have spent the last 5 years focused on mobility innovation around a built environment, Alliance, Texas. And we can tell you with certainty that the industry that will lead the adoption of innovation at a large scale and commercialized level will be the supply chain. And inside that supply chain, it will be long-haul autonomous trucking. And I will come to that in just a minute. Just know, a lot of influences behind the scene that are pushing this forward at that accelerated pace that I talked about. And the reason this is happening now, and if you ask me, I would say you don't have time to wait. Get busy and figure this out because it's here. Talk a little bit about the challenges, things that you're thinking about. And some of these questions were posed in some of the video vignettes that I watched, to get a sense of where you guys were thinking. For us, there's the vision. What do you think? So do you think of the built city, how you bring in eVTOLs, air taxi? How do you begin to deliver food on a regular basis? How do you do shared parking, vertical buildings that have climate exchange measures built in? All of these are questions as to, that's your vision. Then you get to the reality. How do you do it? How do you test it? How do you develop it, R&D? How do you test it? That's all wonderful, but that's in a very controlled environment. And then you go to, how do you put it into a commercialized concept, real world, where you prove whether or not it works, you got it right, and somebody's willing to pay you for that service. That is a different statement than the future vision. And our guiding principle is always, what's the reality and how do we bend that curve quickly to get the right answers? Your challenges are very, and your obstacles and your opportunities, more importantly, are defined clearly in a regulatory world, an infrastructure development world, the scalability of the solution, and then ultimately the interoperability. And if you'll think of everything that you might be faced with around the questions of the future city, these 4 buckets will always guide you in a great place. So regulatory investment. What do our policymakers need to do to enable us to commercialize, so deploy, implement in the built environment where it's actually being utilized? What do they need to do? How do they help us accelerate that? How do they help us find the winners and losers through market as opposed to dictating and then it not working? Infrastructure development, draw a big circle around that. That's right in your wheelhouse. What do you do around the ecosystems? Who are the partners? What is the uniqueness of each of the components around air, ground, people, or goods, and how you move, how you travel through? What do you need in infrastructure to support that next generation? What is that next generation? How we're going to do it? Scalability, and particularly the solution, becomes scalable. So every one of your investors out there, back to the capital side of it, that's beginning to invest in this market, they're looking for commercial returns. And that means you got to get beyond pilots and you got to go test those models. And how do we provide an opportunity and a platform to do that? We would suggest to you that Alliance Texas, as I described it to you and what I showed you, is the most unique place in the US to do all of that. Private ownership, a mix of all transportation, so air, rail, highway, local, a very robust infrastructure, airspace, very complicated airspace from Class G to B to D, that allows you to test, for instance, UAS. The point being here that here's a place in North Texas, in the US, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world in that comprehensive nature, with great public partners like COG, our other municipalities in the state, helping us to advance commercialized technology. Interoperability, perhaps the biggest question that it faces our regulatory world today, and each of your business enterprises. How do they talk to each other? How do they interoperate? Whatever that built system is, how do they collaborate to provide a more efficient system? So think for a second. Take our interstate highway system, Texas Department of Transportation. What we do today in that is we have traffic management systems in all of our districts. And that's basically a big command center where you can monitor freeways, and you also take calls from the public. That's the interoperability of our highway system. We look for weather delays, we look for wrecks, we look for changes, and we put that information out in a perhaps a static message. We put it out on message boards. Think about, what do you need in terms of that data exchange, that management, that messaging as you go to the world of autonomy and the interaction of unmanned aircraft systems, eVTOLs, moving people, air taxis, automated trucks, automated cars, automated people movers, whatever you might think. How does that all interoperate? A really big question. I'd like to put this into context for you to think of it like this. Today, You have you in this interoperability space, you don't have the Microsoft of the world today. So by way of example, you have the Apple iPhones, you have all of the OEMs and technology guys that have that technology. They have the phone, whether it's a truck, whether it's a car. And then you have all of the applications out there. So the smart things in each of these that are driving their AI, driving your access to those applications are there. What we don't have is the platform science, the interoperability manager, Microsoft, to make your apps work with your iPhone. That doesn't exist in the world of the built environment in our cities. We're focusing a lot on it, and most of your political leaders are focused on this as well. It'll come to traffic management systems, safety. Your mind will run wild with the challenges that come out of that. So think of it like that. Again, think of these four right here, and you'll be well guided in terms of how you start to think about what your customers are telling you they need and want. I'm going to talk a little bit now about our solutions, specifically why we're doing them. Again, to just refresh, here at Alliance, Texas, this Mobility Innovation Zone, it's a one-of-a-kind infrastructure with real-world commercialization opportunities. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. And that's right here in North Texas. To draw some examples for you. So this goes back to our Alliance Texas piece right here. In each of these white circles here, again, that's about 100 square miles. Each of these have a different influence of complex built environment influences, which are defining how we need to change our civil engineering practices, our architectural practices, our policy practices, and our infrastructure. What do we need? So think complex airspace with really high density. So people, how do I move UASs, drones around in that space? Who's the command and control? Down at the bottom, high population density residential areas. That's consumers. How does a consumer in heritage, by way of example, which is after our pandemic, by way of example, even more clearly, I'm not satisfied with 2-day delivery of my product, or 1 day, I want it 6 hours. So how does a Walmart get that product to you in 6 hours now, the new normal delivery, as opposed to 1 day or 2 days? That's a very simple question, but incredibly complicated when you move back through. That environment exists. So each of those has a very unique set of characteristics to solve the Rubik's Cube of all of these questions around this technology implementation and what do new cities look like as we transition over the coming decades. On our surface side, we're focused on surface today. As I said, we believe this is happening. We know it's happening. We're doing it right now at Alliance and Commercialize. But just look through things that I've talked about. Here's what we have. Here's what's providing the impetus for technology companies and operators to start deploying. Lots of really good hard and soft infrastructure and really good plans going forward. On the air side, we haven't talked a lot about that, but I'd like for you to think about a wedding cake and think of DFW Airport, Class G airspace, Alliance Airport, B airspace, DFW, Alliance Airport, Class D, and out west, Class G, the Wild West. You just roll. And that upside down wedding cake is how we control our airspace. That configuration does not exist anywhere in the world, from Alliance Airport over to DFW. So what we have here is the ability to begin to learn how to fly drones, unmanned aircraft, how to develop the unified transportation management of those. So think the next sort of FAA. How are you going to command and control these guys buzzing around, delivering each of us our beer, our Starbucks coffee in this very complex airspace? So setting up the rules and regs, that's happening today. And we're doing that at Alliance Texas because of everything I just described. We also are able to begin testing the infrastructure, i.e. 5G. And what's required in terms of the connectivity level And what does that mean in terms of how we manage these guys? We have really good leaders in this space with Amazon and FedEx. UPS left off of that, but they're certainly in this mix. All of these folks, along with new technology providers like Bell Technologies, Google Wing, Lockheed at levels in this area here for the department, of all flying drones and figuring out how to make them work in the national airspace. Strategic partners. All right. Go all the way back. Mr. Perot, Ross Jr. asking our customers, what do you want? So we've asked our customers, what do you want? And that led us to a group of, some of these are customers as well, but these are our thought leaders today and our partners that are on the ground here. I just want to point a few out. So if I asked each of you out there that are watching this, is BNSF an old stodgy railroad? Are they an innovation think tank? You probably go, probably not. Well, I would tell you they are. BN has been flying beyond visual line of sight drones since 2015, the longest and first, by the way, to be able to get permission from the FAA to fly drones up and down their rail lines, 6 hours out, 6 hours back. A lot that they've been doing helps the FAA and us and others figure out how to fly, command, and control these things. AT&T, Deloitte's Global Mobility Practice, Bell Technologies, GOTIC, our Council of Governments, Phantom Auto, Too Simple, Texas A&M Transportation Institute, the FAA, ITS Gone Global. You may not know all of these, but each of these, whether it's in policy, finance, UAS, long haul, trucking, technology, remote operations, they're all in this business, if they're not regulatory on the screen, and are here at Alliance, commercially running autonomous trucks, hostlers, drayage vehicles, and other equipment. I'll give you an example. Phantom Auto, out of 2301 Eagle Parkway on the north end of the airport today, operates remotely hostlers in Oakland, California today. And we're developing and facilitating that technology to help us deploy it at Alliance and other where you can operate equipment remotely and more efficiently. Great do tank leaders is your takeaway from this. Our use cases are most informative. Now I'm moving to, once we've talked to all of our customers and they're telling us this is what we need to do. Again, we're starting with the supply chain resiliency question. And we identified the quadrant matrix that I want to talk to you about and encourage you to think, regardless of where you are planning, think about these 4 quadrants: people, packages, air, surface. And if you'll think about that quadrant and begin to put your problems and your solutions to those problems in these quadrants, you'll find very clear pathway in terms of how you begin to prioritize and develop technology applications to the built environment. We did that through a greenhouse event with about 150 of world leaders, many of our customers and technology providers around supply chain innovation, UAS, and we came up with about 30 use cases. And those 30 use cases, we moved into the air side. So unmanned aerial systems, that is drones and eVTOLs, moving through and defining complex airspace. A quick segue, you may not know this, but it's good to know. 4 years ago, we were approached by Uber Elevate at that time, the first to sort of step into this world of autonomy in a big way. And they asked us as a real estate developer with a very specific interest and skill set in innovation and transportation to help them stand up this worldwide ecosystem. We did it in Dallas, Texas 4 years ago, launched Uber Elevate as a way to signal to the industry there will be flying taxis in the future, technology's here. And we launched that with Bell Technologies, Embraer, Mooney, ChargePoint, obviously Uber, and a couple other consultants in there, and started the eVTOL industry debate publicly. How do you begin to implement? What we knew was This would be way down the road because of the complication of people in the air. So think FAA. But we knew it'd start the dialogue. It would bring to the forefront the drones, the applications of drones utilized in a commercial, delivering packages and providing healthcare products, et cetera, much closer and quicker to the forefront, which it's done. Autonomous and integrated logistics. Again, if you take anything away from my information today, know this is going to lead the adoption of autonomy, artificial intelligence, the modification of transportation systems, long-haul supply chain logistics will lead the way. And the reason is because we know we can do it safely, reliably, 400 to 500 miles. Think Tucson, by the way of too simple, Tucson to El Paso to Fort Worth, which we're doing today. Safety drivers in the cab, but the vehicles are operating 100% autonomously. Lots of things behind that's made that happen. I don't have time to go into. Just know it's here and it works. So autonomous and integrated freight. You think, okay, how do you do that on the ground? Now we got to step back and say, what do we need? What are the short-term questions and what are the long-term questions? So what you're looking at right here, I'll circle, is looking east to west. You can see the airport here, the 11,000-foot airport. You can see the Burlington Northern Intermodal Facility. It has a common rail yard component, but it's largely an intermodal facility. So these are all containers coming into the country or going out of the country on intermodal trains, the most efficient way to move goods today that this country knows. So once it gets in to here, we need to solve efficiency and first mile and last mile delivery and movement of those containers. So the problem statement is this. This is the first question and how you frame it up. This particular facility does 1 million lifts a year, plus or minus, about 1.1 a year. 14,000 foot trains, 14 a day coming into Alliance, Texas. The next 100 million square feet, we need to double that to 2 million lifts. So 100% increase in capacity, throughput, and you can't do it by surface area. You do it through efficiency. That means automation through the intermodal yard, automated cranes, automated hostlers, automated gate systems, automated hostlers in and through public streets to all the warehouses, delivering those to a dock door that brings it to an automated facility that sorts, breaks it down, moves it back out to fulfillment centers, and ultimately to retail stores or you, the customer. That's the first and last mile. So we've chosen those two, largely because on the first mile, we can control because it's all private. And I'm going to show you all of this land, some 1,135 acres that exist right here, is owned 100% by Hillwood. So we have the ability to do autonomy through 15 million square feet of future smart port development adjacent to our airport and the intermodal to deploy these technologies with really not having to get into the public policy debate a lot. How do you drive an automated vehicle on public roadways? End-to-end autonomy is the ultimate vision. The reality is today you saw for the first and the last mile movements inside a global logistics hub like Alliance, and you facilitate the long haul with the automated trucks. That's happening today as we speak. So regional vision on the autonomous integrated long haul. That is to be able to move cargo, number one, in between an intermodal facility to a distribution center and back and forth with long haul. So just think Tucson to El Paso to Fort Worth by way of example. That is beginning those long hauls and integrating them locally. Autonomous drayage. These are hostlers that pull these vehicles around. You've seen them. They're sort of the funny looking little trucks. Moving containers out of the intermodal facility on private roads or public roads to these distribution centers that allow us to process. Doing that autonomously. Back to my list of participants, Phantom Auto is doing that today. There are others. that are doing it across the country on a commercialized basis. We just happen to be doing it with Phantom today. Autonomous drayage over private roads, 100% things we can control near term. Those are our three opportunities, and what we're doing today to activate this and taking North Texas into becoming a national leader in autonomous freight policy, and then ultimately solving the question that is supply chain efficiency, resiliency, and reliability. So all of us saw the soft underbelly during our COVID pandemic of our very efficient but stressed supply chain model and system across the US. It became broken and there were shortages. And that's partly accelerated the deployment of autonomy because what we knew was about a 4 to 5 year deployment now has been compressed to maybe 2 years, maybe in as little as 18 months. But autonomy now will begin to provide us certainty and reliability around this supply chain. An example. So where a COVID-stricken truck driver could not drive, warehouse workers could not fill trucks because of COVID policies, pandemic, autonomous and automated vehicles and equipment don't care about COVID, don't care about the next pandemic. They can operate. So we have an efficiency built in there. Also, autonomous vehicles can operate 23 out of 24 hours a day. Autonomy equipment, same thing. You just need a little bit of time to service equipment, download data, information, et cetera. The point being, the traditional workday and constraints around people doing this work goes away with autonomy. Those are just a couple of metrics which are driving this and why our initial efforts. So just to show you very quickly, here's 1,135 acres, intermodal facility, airport. Here's Too Simple, the world's leading long haul automated trucking operator today. Here's an Amazon air cargo facility, the first in the world, built here at Alliance, opened up about 2 years ago. Here's an Amazon fulfillment center, UPS. You look at the ecosystem. We've just shown a few. All these guys are in e-commerce, and most of those goods are coming in right here, moving through their facilities, broken down and shipped out. Think 35 now. Many of you may have heard of the Texas Connected Freight Corridor. That's our long haul connection. Our first and last mile happens in these areas here, deploying technology. Video, satellite, 5G, inductive charging, smart roadway, static roadway, gate systems, all of the things that you read about in a holistic approach are beginning to be deployed here to facilitate autonomy and technology in the supply chain model in this area that I've just highlighted for you. Another view of it just gives you a sense of scale and things that are going on here. What happens inside the long haul movements out of Alliance and why this becomes important for trucks. So let me give you a summary real quick. Leaders in the autonomy world in trucking. So in no particular order, and not choosing a winner or loser, Waymo, Too Simple, Aurora, Kodiak, Ian Ride, Embark. Let's take those 6 and say those are the leaders today. And they all have a little bit different model of how they're going to operate. But suffice it to say, they're all focused along this line east to west that I'm following, below the Mason-Dixon line, because of technology's limitations on LiDAR and radar, i.e. inclement weather. And they've chosen Dallas-Fort Worth because that's the center of Charleston to San Diego, or Jacksonville, Florida to San Diego, below the Mason-Dixon. DFW's in the middle, and they can build their networks out east and west. And we have a very robust demand in the state with our Texas Triangle, Fort Worth, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. Our Texas Connected Freight Corridor, we're beginning to at least evaluate and deploy technology along our interstate highways, 10, 20 east-west, and 35 north-south, 45 north-south. what do we need to do in that technology to help those long haul trucking guys as they get down into coming from Tucson to El Paso to Fort Worth? Now they're inside and approaching the urban area. What do we need to do to bring them in to the truck ports and the terminal? That's that last mile on technology that I'm talking about. Port to port connectivity is huge. The other thing that's happening is balancing the supply chain among distribution facilities is now being influenced by your 6-hour demand for your product. So one of you may order a 70-inch TV from, Walmart. In the old model, they would ship that out of a big bulk distribution center, maybe, I don't know, Memphis, Tennessee, and it might get to you in 2 days, really quick. But after pandemic, we wanted the next 6 hours. So when you start taking that 70-inch TV out of your local Walmart store off the shelf and taking it down the street in your neighborhood so you get it in 2 hours, now you have to go back up into the bigger system and rebalance it. How do you start to rethink and re-engineer the supply? You do it through technology and information and automation. It's one example of thinking about some of the influences. Walmart, UPS, FedEx, the Best Buys of the world, they're all doing this same thing right now. Rethinking, rebalancing the distributed supply chain. A lot of pluses and minuses here around the deployment of technology. Just know it's happening. Our customers are requiring it. I won't go through everything we've got here, but some of the things that have to happen here for us. So asking the question, all right, now, what do we need? So there are many technology providers out there, smart whiz bang guys, many application writers, so code and or application around that. Many artificial intelligence guys have built smart vehicles. Now, what do we need to support those? Those smart vehicles have the capability to compute through artificial intelligence, as algorithms. Once data is collected over a long period of time, you've deconflicted all of the things you might experience. That truck can react to anything, or that car. Then what do you need? You need really safe highways, dedicated times perhaps, so off hours. You need long areas of connectivity. So, every couple hundred miles, you're able to connect to 5G, talk to your mothership for command, signal updates, whatever it might be. Locally, you need, for instance, inductive charging and or other charging for your electric vehicles. You need a private 5G network that allows you to communicate many disparate users, all things which we're beginning to implement today around technology as we're solving the questions. In this Alliance Texas Smart Port, what does it do for us? It begins to optimize freight mobility systems across the metropolitan area. Again, a solution to a problem and an opportunity. Some of the things that come out of that are electrification, autonomy we've already talked about, and the public benefits are clear. You can look at the third bullet point here in terms of the kilograms of CO2 emissions. For every 10 tractors converted to electric from diesel, it's a real benefit. Operating cost savings are real. So we're at the paradigm shift and change of where and what are we building in terms of infrastructure to support this new technology. I'm going to shift for a second. I'll go to the unmanned aircraft side of it. I've already mentioned to you our partnership with Uber Elevate, now bought by Aurora, and why we were interested in it. We're interested in it because we have a history in aviation. Go back to the airport. We understand the airspace, and we understand supply chain logistics. We understand what's happened in terms of consumer demand and ways to solve that. And some of those ways are through the applications of unmanned aircrafts. And those are drones that are delivering from a warehouse facility, a fulfillment center, or retail your personal products to your home, your front door, a drop off. So a place for high value, quick demand items that you don't need to put on a van or a Toyota e-Pallet or a Neuro facility locally, getting it to you in a different method. And there are lots of really good companies out there. I would encourage you to go to look at Google Wing, which has flown over 25, 30,000 flights of delivering goods, both in Australia and West Virginia, and are now moving into commercial applications, no longer testing, but we're trying to scale and commercialize. The things that Bell Technologies, a hometown favorite, is doing in their App 70 program. You'll see in the top up here, that's a photo I'm circling as our App 70. From our flight test center, the north end of the airport, to Pecan Square, a 7-mile flight, we delivered the first commercial package from a warehouse delivery facility to a drop-off center in Pecan Square with this App 70, Bell's model of a drone that can do and fill this function. So it's beginning to happen. We are working very closely with NASA and the FAA in terms of that airspace configuration. It goes back to all the technology around radar, 5G, the command and control, the traffic management system. How do you manage it? So what you see in the picture right here is a engineer who's actually out flying at our old Bell helicopter training facility on the north end of the airport, has 5 landing pads, and is now our Alliance Texas Flight Test Center for drones and eVTOLs. And out of that, in a airspace, again, that's around G and D and B, we can fly with the FAA and NASA these aircraft under 400 feet into these airspaces and start helping the policymakers scale through setting up the standards for command and control of these aircraft when they start flying commercially. And we're beginning to push fixed routes out to spots, delivering goods, and that'll grow over time as we move into the full adoption. Really exciting stuff, great technology out there. On the eVTOL side, so electric vertical takeoff and landing, 5-passenger taxi, which is what Uber Elevate started. Bell Helicopter has their Nexus, and I'm going to go back real quick here. No, I'm not going to do that because that'll make you get dizzy here. You'll see in some of these a picture of the Nexus on our screen. That model exists. They also have the app program that I've talked about. There are other manufacturers out there like Joby, which has an aircraft now that is in its certification stage with the FAA for airframe and flight safety, and power plant, fully electric, that is flying and could be flown today and will be into the market very quickly. They'll be manufacturing close to 50 a year beginning next year, as that begins to get near the deployment and commercialization. And many people ask me and others in our company, when does that happen? We think it happens sometime in the next 10 years. The technology's there, command and control has to happen. All right, so what do you do in terms of this UAS? So if you're gonna think about aircraft, either unmanned, so drones, or eVTOLs, you need to, and I'm gonna give you a word caution, you need to be right here in this. You better crawl, you better walk before you run. No other way to do it. There's too much at stake around that third dimension and getting it right and how you begin to safely fly these things around. I mentioned to you what we're doing in that crawl. We're somewhere between crawl and walk right now. And we're out here through all the regulatory agencies. We're doing exactly what's required to help our policymakers begin to define how we're going to do it. And the money, go back to the money coming into the space, the technology providers that are out there that have it, they're accelerating this cycle now very quickly. So it is happening at God's speed right now. back to our quadrant. Now you think about, if I'm thinking from a civil engineering standpoint in any of these boxes, here's what happens. I'm going to leave this up for just a second, and I want you to think about the quadrants: people, packages, two different sort of precious cargoes, if you will, surface and air. Around autonomy and technology and the things that you can do. These are some of our use cases and commercialized cases we're doing today. We'll make this available for all to have, but when you start to do the confluence, I'm drawing a circle around this group right here. I mentioned to you the platform science. So in each of these quadrants here, you have the technology, you have the original equipment manufacturers, you have the application guys. In the middle is where all these things talk to one another, and that's the platform. Airspace traffic management, testing zones, intermodal operability, analytics and digital platforms, smart infrastructure, mobility showcasing, and most importantly, that one down at the bottom, the IoT and connectivity, ultimately that helps us begin to scale all that. Right now, Hillwood, my team, my innovation team, we are spending hundreds of our time in this confluence right here, trying to figure out what's the right way to deploy technology and have a platform that works. So that's it. I'm going to leave this up here for you and step back, and it looks like we've got a couple of minutes. And I'm going to say to you now, think about it in terms of the mega cities of the world, and go to some of those questions that you guys have asked. And Beck would give me just a little bit here. I'm going to reference a note because I was really curious as to some of the challenges you're proposing to yourself. So I'm going to summarize. What are the future cities? How do you embrace technology and innovation? How do you prioritize for people? Civil engineers versus system engineers, mega cities, microgrids, artificial intelligence, unmanned aircraft, unified traffic management systems, customer directed and chosen. These are all observations, challenges, questions I heard your speakers address. And I just walked you through a real world case where every one of those questions are the same questions we're asking and we're going through. So I'm often asked, okay, this is happening, give us some examples. So Too Simple today at Alliance, we built their first truck port. It'll be the first of 70 across that east-west, south of the Mason-Dixon. And we are running 4 commercial, so these are revenue routes out of Alliance with customers, intermodal goods and or broken down shipping goods long haul. So between point A to B, for instance, Fort Worth to El Paso, Fort Worth to Memphis, autonomously. Too Simple, it does 200 of these routes a day in their system and growing 3 to 5 almost every week as the industry shifts to it. So from Tucson to El Paso, that truck you see in the lower quadrant there, it drives 100% autonomously. From El Paso to Fort Worth, it drives 100% autonomously, except when you get to Fort Worth and you get on 35 and there are changes in construction activity, which you have to intercede for safety reasons. The point being, it's happening. And that autonomy then feeds into autonomous drayage, 5G, all of which is being deployed that I've talked about. So roadways, what's the next roadway look like for this? How do you move goods? How do you begin to build, for instance, pose a question, how do you begin to build what I would call vertiports, which we built one in Frisco at our Frisco station, that is essentially an airport that has to operate at a peak demand level. So at lunchtime, one of your speakers spoke to 150 drones showing up delivering lunch to an office building. Exactly. How do you make that work? So what are the operational, what are the safety requirements? What's the infrastructure required for fast charge on those little guys? All of those questions, while you may be posing them as very future thinking, I can assure you technology and leaders such as Hillwood, we're answering those questions as we speak. Designing vertiports, designing that platform operation standard, which says, here's how I can move sequences through. I'm going to step back from that and challenge you with, think about some of the assets you have in the state here with the Texas Transportation Institute. So this is part of the Texas A&M system. I know many of you that may be watching this are probably Aggies. Way to go. There's probably some of you that are not Aggies. Just know TTI is gold standard. They also have access to facilities like Relish, that's part of their campus, that is under contract with our national defense apparatus. So through Army's Futures Command there, and testing the future battlefield equipment, 100% autonomous vehicles. So testing 5G, testing resiliency, testing interoperability, that's happening in our state. We also have the same thing in terms of cybersecurity. How do you begin to secure? Those are things that are happening in this state right now. Okay, back away and go, when do we think we'll be largely autonomously driven inside our Alliance Texas platform? That's a long way out. When you think about, we've got 55 million square feet on the ground today. The next 50 to 60 million square feet, we intend on implementing autonomy through the system and to the buildings at the fastest pace that the regulatory world and our customers will allow us. So think 20 years, we think that next 50 million square feet will reflect everything that I've just walked you through. So I'm going to begin to wrap up here. Hopefully this has been helpful for you to put in the context of your future world vision and what is the infrastructure and reimagining that. And what hopefully I've been able to do for you is to uncomplicate it, one, demonstrate to you that this is happening, it's commercializing, there's no time to wait, embrace it, understand it. And back to, don't overcomplicate it. Answer the question from your customers, what do they need? And they'll tell you where to go, and then go out and figure out a way to do it and help our policymakers figure out a way to do that on a scalable level. Now, the last thing I'll leave you with, everything we do at Alliance is always underscored by, is there greater public benefit than we as developers? And we like to answer that question. I've already given you the metrics. Yes, we make sure the public is benefiting from our development activities in just about any measure you can come up with. So think about our federal government right now talking about a $580 billion pure infrastructure package. How should we spend that? Where should we spend it? How do we go about broadband capacity that solves the social equity, but yet stands up what we know is the next generation of autonomy around things like data centers, edge computing, which takes the latency out of this. Those are questions that are being posed right now while this big bucket of money is being contemplated by our national leaders. How do we spend it correctly? Spend it right the first time and really leverage up what we know is happening in the commercialized world, driven by our customers, not by what a government planner at the federal level is telling us we should go spend this money. You should ask yourselves the question, how do I best solve the future state 30 years from now? There are many other pieces we could go into, energy, the pure broadband piece, all of which are tied to this. We don't have time today. Hopefully you've been able to garner a little bit out of this and know you're on the right path. I wish you the best, and I'm always available through your leadership discussions, questions, anything you would like. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Best wishes to you and good luck. Derek, we will conclude this.